thank you guys so much for joining in. I think a great response again for this webinar. Close to 100 registrations, and of course, it is a very important topic as well. Definitely, something that should help you guys out a lot, right? So profile building. Now, this is such a vast term, and it can entail so many different things. And no matter how much I talk to you about it, there's going to be different answers for different people, right? Profile building may not be the same for somebody applying to an MBA program versus somebody who's applying to a robotics program versus somebody who's applying for a literature PhD, right? It's going to be very, very specific, very, very nuanced, very, very tailored. However, at Gradvine, we believe in simplifying things and breaking things down. What we've realized through our years of experience evaluating applications and helping people get into great places, and through our own journeys as masters graduates as well, is that you need to break down everything related to the admissions process with two very important things, right? And that's what our answers will be always backed by. The first is logic. The second thing is past experiences. So no mumbo jumbo answers here. We'll only give you straight logic that you need to follow. So to break down this whole complicated world, of profile building and so many different questions you have, as always with most complicated things, I recommend that you work backwards. Now, this is something you may have heard me saying if you've attended my previous webinars, or if you've heard Suraj post his webinars in the past, is that you need to work backwards in order to come to a good conclusion as to how you want to build a profile, right? So what is the end result that you want? Why are we trying to build these profiles? Why are we having this entire discussion about profile building? It is for that one moment where the admissions officer to the university you apply to, maybe a dream university, maybe something else, is viewing your application and is viewing your profile, right? And that's what you're building your profile for. It is to convince that admissions officer at that point in time. Now, what is a profile? Let me break that down even further to simplify it even further. It is a set of credentials, maybe, or a certain set of boxes that the admissions officer wants to tick off to see whether you're worthy of getting into the program, right? And instead of me telling general things like you need to do an internship, you need to do a project, you need to get real world experience and all of that, view it in terms of these boxes that we are ticking off, and that will make a lot more sense to you, right? So I made a deck for this as well. Usually not a very big fan of decks, but I think this will help you relate and help you understand a lot easier. And I'm sure you have plenty of questions that are particular to your case, but I really request you to focus a little bit on the logic that I'm trying to tell you, because I'm going to try and tell you what the admissions officer looks at in a profile, what he or she wants, and how much importance each part of your profile is to the admissions officer. Then we can discuss how you can build to that, right? Because you know what the admission officer wants then. So let me just pull up that deck. Here's the deck, right? And like I said, please understand the logic that I'm going to try and tell you. I'm going to try and tell you how an admissions officer views a profile, what is important to the admissions officer, what is less important to the admissions officer, and how you can portray that, right? And that's how you figure out how to build your profile at the end of the day, by figuring out your end objective. So let's talk about the profile itself, right? And this is how, in simple terms, you try and break up a profile or a list of boxes or a list of credentials that an admissions officer is looking at. And please note the little bit of a partition. I try to do some visual representation here with my limited skills, but the partition between these two things, right? So in your profile, when you're submitting your application, there are two separate things which you can categorize separately, right? The first is your quantitative characteristics or quantitative traits or quantitative parts of your profile, which are simple hard numbers, right? There is no debate with this. These are numbers that are on paper, and nothing is going to change that. It is what you've done so far. The second half of your profile is the qualitative traits, your other skills, which you cannot really put a hard number to. I cannot say that your vision is an 8 on 10 versus somebody else's vision being 6 on 10. It really depends on how you convey it at the end of the day. But GPA, GRE, and all of these other things are hard numbers. They're pretty common across the board. Now, let's talk about how admissions officers view each of these characteristics on both these sides, right? On the left, the quantitative numbers are a little easier to interpret. It is the GPA, the GRE, and the TOEFL, in that precedence, in that importance order, first, second, third. Now, notice how the TOEFL is in a smaller text size. Again, this is not a glitch or an oversight from my end. I put TOEFL in a smaller size because it's less important, right? The most efficient visual representation of the importance of the TOEFL, if you please. Of course, you need to clear the minimum cutoffs, but again, it's not going to clinch you an admit or anything of that sort. So let's address the GPA aspect of it. The GPA perhaps is maybe the most important aspect of your application, right? Because you are applying for an academic program, an academic master's, which may be very related to what you've studied or maybe slightly different. But the GPA is viewed as a fair reflection of your ability to perform in an academic setting, right? In your last 4 years of college. So your GPA, if you have a very good GPA, that automatically puts you in line to get into a lot of top schools. So if you have somebody telling you that you shouldn't be applying to a very good school if your GPA is in the eights, then don't listen to that person because you always have a shot. So that is the level of importance of the GPA in an admissions officer's mind. Like I said, it shows your ability to perform in an academic setting, and therefore it's very, very important because you are moving to an academic setting in a master's program as well. Now, the next hard number in your profile, as it is the GRE, right? Um, the GRE is less important than your GPA, but also keep in mind that apart of all the six factors that I mentioned in your profile or everybody else's profile who's applying, the GRE is the only common factor pretty much where the playing field is level. So that is the parameter which admissions committees use to sort of figure out your overall quantitative aptitude in a sense, right? Whether this person has a little bit of that common sense and that ability to reason, right? So the GRE is viewed as a filtering parameter only in that case. Think about it logically. Again, like I said at the beginning, logic and past examples. Your ability to succeed, say in an economics program, for instance, does not matter much, in terms of how good your vocabulary is, right? If your vocabulary is great, the admissions officer is not going to be very impressed and say, oh, let's give this person an admit straight away. It's just a measure to test your aptitude in a level playing field in terms of when everybody else has given the exam. So if you get a fairly decent GRE score, and a decent GRE score varies depending on program to program, but typically let's say a 315, then again your profile is in and around the area, for you to really look at some really good schools. Of course, if you get a 320, it's even better. But the difference between a 320 and a 330 is almost non-existent for a lot of programs. So a decent GRE score is what you will require. Let's leave it at that because we need to move ahead with regards to the right column, which is going to take a lot more discussion. Now, the reason why a lot of you might be on this webinar is because of a couple of reasons. Now, what if my GPA is low? Then how do I compensate for it? How do I build my profile? That's the question coming, right? My GRE is not very strong, or I don't think I'll get a very good GRE score. How can I compensate that with the rest of my profile? These are the most common sort of questions that we hear, and that is something that we are going to address in the next slide. Again, a little bit of visual representation with my limited skills that I've tried. Notice how the barrier is gone, right? Now, how do you blur the line between, for an admissions committee officer, to sort of use your qualitative aspects to overcome your GPA or GRE? Now, if you turn your head to the right and read what I've written, again, I've done this so that you don't fall asleep, because it may be too much detail. But again, I implore you, listen to the logic. It will help you a lot. But just turn your head and read what I've written. The qualitative aspects can either compensate or complement the quantitative aspects. Now, what is compensate? It's very clear. If your GPA is a little low, can you compensate it with your projects and the projects and the results of your projects? Can you compensate that with your vision? Maybe yes. I'm going to try and tell you how. What is complement? If your GPA is good or your GRE is also good, How can you elevate your application further to get into even better places, by showing the three aspects on the right, and showing them very, very strongly, right? So let's discuss that a little bit now. Again, logic, past examples. I'll give you both, which could be encouraging for a lot of you. Now, as an admissions officer, like I said, when I'm looking at the GPA, why is it important for me? I said your ability to perform in an academic setting, or your technical prowess, or your technical skills, right? Now, if your GPA is low, your performance in classes where you're taking these technical courses are low, or slightly lowish, you can compensate that a little bit through your projects and the results of those projects, right? Now, leave the left side for now, focus on the right side column: vision, projects, and results. The way you show the admissions committee that, hey, listen, okay, my GPA may not be as high as some of the other applicants to this master's program, but look at the kind of work I've done and look at the goal I have for myself. So what is your vision? Every admissions officer, after the GPA, right after the GPA, the most important thing he or she wants to understand is where you see yourself 10 or 15 years down the line after you graduate from the program, right? What kind of job do you want to be doing? What sort of company do you want to start? What kind of technical work do you want to be doing? What kind of organization you want to run? It could be anything, right? This needs to be absolutely crystal clear, and the projects that you've done should complement this vision. Now, why am I talking to you about this for so long and not about the kind of projects you want to take up? Because it varies for every person. The one thing that you have to keep in mind is that the projects and the results you delivered through these projects complements the vision that you are trying to portray, right? And when we bring Suraj in to talk to you about specifics, when you ask questions about your technical projects, we'll discuss that as well. But a very basic example is, if you say that you want to build machine learning algorithms, or some sort of an AI based app that can, I don't know, uh, predict election results based on past behaviors or surveys or something of that sort. I'm sure something of that sort is already done, but it's a vision, right? You portray a vision that you want to do it at a different level, and it's largely AI ML analytics related. But all your projects are in cyber security and web development, for instance. Then doing those projects to build your profile is simply not good enough. Oftentimes, and you'll agree with me, with you guys, engineers, engineering schools, vast majority of our audience, I'm sure, is that unfortunately these projects, you don't have that much choice, right? Maybe it's changing, but during my time, at least, I did not have that much of a choice to choose my projects. Now, this may not be the most ideal thing, but it would be good for you to tailor your vision according to the projects that you have. Now, it may not really be where you want to see yourself years down the line, but if it complements the projects you've done and the results you've delivered so far, talk about how you have a vision of continuing the same work at an advanced stage after you graduate from the master's program. And as a result, talk about the kind of electives you want to take, all of this in your statement of purpose. Now, what does this do? So the admissions officer notices that, okay, this person's GPA is a little here and there, but he's really done some good work which is related to what he wants to do in the future. So this person really might know his technical stuff. Let's give him a chance. So you understand the thought process a little bit with the admissions committee. That's how you build a profile, not simply taking up random projects. But at this stage, if you're very close to applying, or if you're applying, a year later, if you're in your second year, um, take up projects which build into a long-term vision. That is very, very important. Now, how do all of these factors play in? Again, let me give you an example in terms of the admissions committee officer's mind, right? Again, logic, past examples. We had a student come to us a couple of years ago, and listen to this, very carefully, applying to engineering management programs. Many of you may not be applying to engineering management, but it does hold true for quite a few programs. But the GPA was fairly low. It was at a 2.4 on a scale of 4. Now conversions vary, but I think you get a sense that that's not going to be too much more than a 60% or something of that sort, right? Maybe 60, 65. um, Good projects, right? very good projects. He developed a an artificial intelligence sort of algorithm for tumor detection, which had a fairly decent accuracy rate. Again, by fairly decent, I talk about by college standards at an undergrad level. Sure, you cannot deploy it with any level of confidence, but the vision he had and how he explained he wanted to improve that and deploy it and scale was very, very good, right? Now, so what did he have? He did not have the GPA on the left. He had number two on the right. He had the projects, he had decent results. No vision though. Now, how do you do that to elevate your profile in the admissions committee's mind? You portray a vision that is very, very related to this project and talk about how you want to take it to the next level, right? This also, in a sense, is profile building, right? You're elevating your vision and your overall profile in front of the admissions committee. It's not about taking up a whole bunch of projects that are unrelated, but it's about forming a vision that is relevant to a really good project or a really good couple of projects that you have. Now, this person in question, how did he compensate for the GPA apart from these two concepts on the right? He scored a 330 on the GRE. Now, what happened as a result? It was a Purdue MEM admit, right? Now, you might ask me and you might come back to me and say, oh, is that so? Then can I just simply, get a very high GRE score and compensate for a low GPA? That unfortunately again is not really possible, because you will get into universities at a certain stage. But suppose this person applied to in the past a place like a Dartmouth or a Cornell or a Duke for an engineering management. Because of the low GPA, despite everything else, he got a reject. So it's a very it depends sort of situation. But if you want the best shot to sort of compensate for a slightly lower GPA, then the way you do it is having projects that are tied into a vision and a decent enough GRE score that shows that you have some level of aptitude. That's how you elevate your profile. Again, reiterating that point, building your profile does not mean you go do a bunch of different projects and online certification courses and all of that. You have to understand the end result. For me to recap, when the admissions officer is looking at your thing and your application and is ticking these 6 boxes, um, how do you make sure that he feels that you're ticking a lot of those boxes? That's very, very important. So projects that are tied into your vision, which can compensate for a slightly lower GPA. Now, if you have a very good GPA, a very good vision, and you have projects that complement that vision, or in our case, let's call it a vision that complements the projects, then you can get into even better places. So that's what I mean by compensate and complement, right? That's how you elevate your profile in front of the admissions committee. Profile building is not always about taking up random projects, right? Let me talk about the little thing on the left and the one on the right, which is characteristics and TOEFL. TOEFL, I'm going to take only a few seconds on that. You need to clear the minimum cutoffs at the university, which are typically, I don't know, between 90 and 100. You'll find that on the university websites. Once you clear the cutoff by 1 mark or 1 point, somebody who clears it by 10 points or has a 10-point higher score than you also, there's no advantage the person has. That's why TOEFL is very tiny on the left side. What are characteristics? Now, the reason why I put characteristics is because a lot of you coming to me, talking about extracurricular activities to build or boost a profile. What extracurricular activities? So again, a lot of people applying to engineering management programs or management programs or techno managerial, whatever, this kind of stuff, come and tell me my profile is very, very technical. I've done only technical projects. I haven't done any management related stuff, right? Again, quick example, sort of swaying towards MEM, but just bear with me. Your work with extracurriculars, maybe you managed a fest, maybe you managed 30-40 people. It's not going to really compensate for your other aspects, right? So if you have great extracurriculars, you managed a great fest, or you had a wonderful footfall for a stall that you had and stuff like that, that's not going to compensate for your technical projects. That's not going to really tie in too much to your vision. It's definitely not going to compensate for a GPA. So let's keep that out of your mind. That's a myth when people tell you, right? Other consultants and consultancies, they ask, oh, is your extracurricular good? No, your co-curricular has to be good, which means your technical projects. Now, where extracurriculars come in to a certain extent is to show off your personality characteristics. I should have put that a little smaller, but again, it's debatable, right? In terms of importance, your personality characteristics why the university or the admissions officer sitting in front of, again, your application, why it's important to him or her is because he or she wants to gauge your ability to work in a team, your ability to interact in a very diverse atmosphere, and to get a sense of what kind of person you are in the program, right? Nobody wants a jerk joining the program, which sort of spoils the class atmosphere. And you might think that why is this guy bringing up random facts? I never heard of something like this. I'm talking to you about this because I've heard this straight from admissions officers when I was at university. They say Indian students, a lot of times they have great academic records and they show great technical aptitude through their projects, but their creativity and their ability to thrive in a social atmosphere or network efficiently doesn't really come out. Now, that being said, please do not spend an entire paragraph talking about your model United Nations experience or how you had 400 people come to a fest. It should be just 3 or 4 lines to show off that apart from your technical prowess, you really have the ability to make the classroom a much better place by collaborating with your classmates and by having great interpersonal skills. That needs to be subtly conveyed through your extracurricular activities. Oftentimes, if your GPA, if your projects, if your vision is very strong, this part doesn't even show up in your statement of purpose, right? But it does play a certain role if you don't have certain other things. So again, I'm not going to use this webinar to come and tell you that do projects, do internships, because everybody knows you have to do projects and internships. But the way you build your profile, like I said, is the two things on the left, which the GPA you may not have too much control over, but if it's good, it's great for you. If not, you have to use your projects and the results delivered with your projects. They have to be in line with the coherent vision that you're portraying. That's how you build and elevate your profile. What is your takeaway from this whole lesson that I gave you? Sometimes to build your profile, you don't even need to go out there and do a project or do an internship at this stage. It's just about effectively communicating what you already have. That will automatically build and elevate your profile to a large extent. Now, I think I've spoken for quite a bit of time, and I wanted to consciously leave uh, a lot of time here for questions, right? Because profile building will have specific questions. You're going to have specific nuances, which is impossible for me to address, by giving one general speech about how to build your profile. So I think we'll start addressing your questions to talk about specifics. But I think before we go there, I hope you paid attention and understood the logic and how an admissions officer thinks. Imbibe that, think about it logically. That's the only way you can elevate your profile or build your profile at this stage, right? So yeah, let's go to the questions. I think Suraj, you can start addressing the questions. I'll just take a sip of water.
Sure. So the first question we have was, can you describe what you mean by a high or a low GPA? Of course, this is something that is going to be very program specific. Let's say if you're a computer science graduate who's applying to a computer science program, they're much more likely to look at all of the grades that you have in the core computer science fundamental courses like operating systems, maybe database management systems, algorithms, data structures, all of those. Depending on which master's program you're applying to, and what background you come from, the high or the low GPA sort of varies. To generalize, again, take this with a pinch of salt, to generalize, anything on a scale of 4, which is less than 3, is a very low GPA. Something that is between 3 and 3.5 is a decent enough GPA. 3.5 and above is a pretty good GPA. Let's convert that to the Indian scale. If you are coming from a percentage sort of a scale, anything that is above 75% is a pretty decent GPA. Between 65 and 75 is still okay. Anything less than 65 is a pretty low GPA. For people that are coming from a CGPA sort of a scale, on a scale of 10, anything above 7.8, maybe 8 and above is a pretty decent GPA. Between 7 and 8 is okay, and then below 7 is sort of the bad realm, if you may, for the GPAs. What can a student studying in a non-IT course do if they're still in their second or third year of undergraduation? We will address this particular topic of students that are not in their final years towards the end of the session, I think. because there's a lot of things that you can do if you're in your second and third year, and that's something that we will probably take 5 or 6 minutes at the end to address. So stay tuned for that. Let's go through the questions for people who are in their final years and getting ready to apply, and then we'll come to the second and third years towards the end of the session itself. While GRE is mentioned as a quantitative aspect, how will it change with a lot of universities announcing that the GRE will not be required for admission in the fall term? One of the most important things, right? This is also something that we've observed with both undergraduates to or high school students who are applying to undergraduate studies, as well as undergraduates who are applying to their master's studies. Most of the standardized testing, including the SATs, the ACTs, and the GRE, these are exams that have been sort of put on hold, or they're taking at-home exams and stuff like that. And universities are essentially coming out and saying that they will not give as much of a weightage to the GRE or to the other standardized tests. One of the things that is going to happen then in that particular situation is that the emphasis on your GPA, which is one of the hard numerical metrics, goes up by a lot. So if you have a lower sort of a GPA, you will have to show a much more holistic sort of a profile in terms of compensating with a really very succinct sort of vision for the reason, or go into depth of the reasons for why you're applying to that particular program at that particular university. Do a bunch of different projects, make sure that the GPA is up, and make sure that all of these projects, internships, work experience, etc., align to a particular vision, like Sreekar has mentioned. So in the case that GRE or ACT or SATs are not really going to be considered by universities, they are going to depend heavily on the other factors, other criteria, and therefore you want to make sure that the SOP that you submit is going to be as strong as possible.
So we have a question from Aditi. My academic project is evaluated by my college or university. How can I project my personal projects in a credible way? Now, one simple thing you have to keep in mind is that universities abroad, right? They do not look for any proof or any certification or anything of that sort. Now, if your argument is that the final year project shows up on your transcript, they don't even evaluate your final year transcript, to give you an admit. It's all about, in a sense, how you convey that project relevant to your vision, right? In the past, we've had a lot of students take up projects with us itself, and we are, a completely third-party organization. We do not even portray that as an internship because it's unethical, but we just guide students on how they can take up, some sort of project. The universities only care about the results of your project, right? Sure, it is impressive if you say that I did this project under this professor from IIT back in 2018 or something of that sort. But if you cannot do that, you can talk about how on your own, because you had this particular vision for your career, you took up a project that is going to help you pick up certain skills in order for you to achieve that vision. And you already delivered results at a small scale right now. That is convincing, right? It's all about the narrative that you're doing. Now, whether the project is independent or no, will not have as much value if you convey it properly. It's very, very important that you convey the projects properly. That's where, carefully crafting your SOP technically in a technically correct manner is, very, very important. How is there a way I can calculate my grades on an American GPA scale? I think Suraj has sort of told you that you don't have to do any conversion, guys. That's the university's headache. Some universities will require you to get a West conversion, but that's a whole different complication. You need not apply to those places, to be honest. Like Suraj said, don't worry about converting it to a scale of 4. On a 1 to 10 scale, which a lot of your universities have. Anything above an 8 is a good GPA. 9 is outstanding. 7 to 8 is decent. Anything below a 6.5, I'd be a little worried about it, right? Don't bother with the whole conversion of the GPA thing. Can my relevant work experience compensate for the fact that I don't have a lot of projects? Of course it can. Because at the end of the day, when you're working, you're going to be working on projects. You're not going to be sitting idle, right? There's going to be something you're doing for a client, or some improvement you're doing for the company, or something that is relevant to your nature of work, essentially. Again, how do you elevate your work experience? If you have significant work experience, show your long-term vision to be related to the stuff you did at work. That's important, right? Again, let's talk about the two things, logic and past examples. In the past, I had a student, mechanical engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer. I don't know how to code. No mechanical engineer knows how to code, right? We hate that stuff. But he worked at Infosys for a few years. A fairly okay IT job. You know how mechanical engineers recruited to day one IT companies are. Not really cutting edge work, but the way he portrayed his love for data crunching, analytics, and his vision for how he wants to improve companies and clients in that space led to him get into the University of Minnesota Twin Cities for a business analytics program from mechanical engineering. So his mechanical engineering projects have nothing to do with where he got in, but his vision that was related to the stuff he did at work compensated in a sense, right? Because it's very relevant to what he wants to do. So that's how you think about it. Your work experience, if it's relevant to your goals, 100% can compensate. If you don't have great academic projects, it's just the way you convey that. Suraj, you want to go ahead with the next one?
Yeah. The next question is, what effect does the university tier or what class of university you come from, what class of undergraduate university you come from, affect your chances of getting an admit to a really good university? Again, in the past, there were very, very few people from tier two sort of institutions that were going abroad to get their master's degrees. All of the guys that were going abroad to get their graduate degrees, either a master's or a PhD, were usually from an IIT or a BITS or maybe even a Manipal or a VIT. So one of the things that universities abroad, which is the universities that you're trying to apply to, have in their database is a database of everyone that has applied from these sort of universities. And so judging the student itself, they were able to sort of judge the undergraduate institution these students were coming from. However, that has changed in the past 5 to 10 years. There are a bunch of students that go from tier two and even tier three institutions to universities abroad and are doing significantly better than anyone else that's coming from their sort of universities, right? So in terms of an answer to that question, the tier itself, as long as you are from a IIT or a BITS, will matter. Apart from that, I think they look at all universities to be pretty significantly equal. I don't see the tier outside of the IITs and the BITS making a lot of difference. However, if you are from an IIT and a BITS, of course, you are going to get a little bit of a preferential treatment given the fact that these are premier institutions within India. Everything else, be it a Manipal, a VIT, a Delhi Technological Institution, or a Shiv Nadar or SRM or a CVIT for that matter, all of these pretty much fall on the same level, and they then go into the depths of your own profile, compare your application with someone else who's applying from a different institution, and then give you an admit or not based on your strengths and weaknesses, not necessarily prejudicing you from the university or the undergrad institution you're specifically coming from.
So here's an example I want to give you to back it up. Sorry, Suraj. Talk about the tier thing, right? Again, like I said, logic, past examples always are answers here. Last year, we had students applying to the top engineering management programs, very similar GPAs. One of them from the College of Engineering, Guindy, Anna University. I think without a doubt, tier A, right? Top tier school, very well recognized abroad. The other from CBIT, which is most definitely tier two, if not lower than that. The person from CBIT, similar GPA, got into Stanford. The other person from College of Engineering India did not get in. So the tier, like Suraj said, is slowly, the lines are being blurred. US universities recognize a lot more colleges now, and they're giving admits to so many people from different colleges that they will be inclined to giving you an admit as well, even if you come from an ordinary college, because they understand that the kids coming out from there as well are very, very good. If you're from an IIT or BITS, a little bit of preference for sure. If you have a 9 point from a BITS, you obviously have certain advantages, but don't be discouraged. Don't let anybody tell you, bottom line, if you have a good GPA coming from tier 2, tier 3, that you should not be applying for top schools, right? That's a big hoax. That's a myth. You absolutely should be gunning for the good schools.
Again, just to add on that, in terms of past admits that we've seen, right? We've had a couple of students, one from a BITS Pilani with a 9 point GPA and a 333 on the GRE. We've had someone else who had a 8 point something GPA from Symbiosis Institute of Technology in Pune. Definitely not a tier 2, maybe even a tier 3. Both of them applied to computer science programs with very, very strong fundamentals and a very strong profile. One of them, which is the Symbiosis guy, made it into Georgia Tech's computer science program, whereas the guy from BITS did not. The guy from BITS went on to Stanford, whereas the guy from Symbi did not make it to Stanford. Both of them, however, made it to Carnegie Mellon's computational data science program, which essentially tells you that the lines, again, are very blurry at this point in time. If you are coming from a tier 2 or a tier 3 institution, as long as you can portray that you have of course, have a strong profile, and then make sure to portray that you have a strong profile, you absolutely stand a chance, will not be prejudiced against. I'm going on to the next question from Chitra, who says, I don't have a lot of projects, co-curriculars, extracurriculars. Will my decent GPA be enough to compensate for it? This is a classic case of the opposite of what is happening, right? We get a lot of students with a lower sort of a metric on the left side of the slide that Sreekar put up, where they come in with a lower GPA, lower GRE, and maybe a TOEFL is immaterial, but and then try to compensate for it using projects. But this is sort of the diametrically opposite case. If the GPA is good, you've already ticked off a bunch of boxes in the admissions committee. You've already gotten yourself a big edge over everyone else that is sort of applying, and therefore our recommendation will be to keep GPAs as high as possible. You have about 2 or 3 months of time before you start, before you finish your applications. And one of the things I will highly recommend is doing a couple of projects within these 3 months. If not a couple, just one that is in line with the vision that you're trying to craft. As long as you're able to show that there is a particular university and a program that you are definitely applying to, and for specific reasons, connected to past projects or work experience that you have, and then showcase that you have a high GPA, showcase that you've done well academically, that is almost all of the battle won. So there is a little bit of time for you to pick up either a project or an internship somewhere. Try and do that. If you are from a computer science or a traditional engineering background, it's very easy to do that online nowadays. If not, make sure that you highlight the fact that you are academically very strong. You took your theory as well as practical classes, including the lab sections of your undergrad in either engineering or sciences, very seriously. And that forms the base for the application that you're putting forward to that particular university's program. Once you do that, I think you should be pretty well poised to clinch a pretty good admit. Go ahead.
What do admission officers of MEM courses really look out for? So I hope there's not too many non-MEM guys, or anybody who's looking at management programs. This could be a little relevant. So the first requirement for you to be get into a good engineering management program in an admissions officer's mind is that you have to be a good engineer, right? So they need your technical skills to be on point. Like I said, they don't care about how many fests you organized, how many people came in, because that's what HR and strategy largely, and that's not a large part of the engineering management program at all. So you need to show that you are a good engineer. How do you show a good engineer? Through your GPA and your technical projects. Now, the other aspect you need to elevate when you're applying to engineering management programs is whatever project that you have, whether it's, you're a mechanical engineer and you maybe did your SAE, BAHA kind of stuff, or you're a computer science guy, you've done some ML, AI kind of stuff, or, you're an ECE guy, some kind of telecommunication stuff that you may have done, right? You need to think about how the MEM courses and the skills you pick up on the management side, in operations management and all of that, you have to show the admissions committee your vision for scaling some of these projects or products, right? Maybe you created a great product or a great, robot maybe, which cannot be put into mass production because the cost of components is too high. How are you going to leverage the power of management to, reach economies of scale and, cut down the costs? So that's what you need to do for an MEM program. Show that you're a really good engineer, show really good technical projects first, and then talk about your vision of how you're going to use your management committee, your management skills to sort of scale that into a full-fledged, product or a company in future. That's what they want to look for. A lot of times people talk about fests and all of that and spend their, 3 paragraphs writing about how they manage people. That's not strong at all. You need to show a much more mature outlook in terms of stuff like scaling, in terms of solving problems and stuff like marketing research and, process automation and all of that. So it needs to be technically correct. Again, that's what an admissions committee looks for at the really top programs.
The next question is from Highgrave, who asks us, do research papers qualify as projects? Absolutely, man. I mean, if you already have published research, That counts as both research work that you can show for, that shows that you are academically very sort of oriented. It also speaks towards your interest in that particular sort of a sector within the program that you're applying to, and therefore research papers absolutely count as projects. However, one of the other things that I would say research papers count for is your technical acumen. If you were able to publish a research paper at a highly sort of a reputed journal, it shows that not only are you academically oriented, not only do you have the technical fundamentals of that particular field, but you've also taken the effort to go through an academic procedure, which is what a publishing a research paper is. So when anyone's applying to a thesis masters or PhDs or actual graduate schools that are research heavy, having research papers puts you in a different tier as compared to other Indian undergrad applicants who generally do not have research papers. So congratulations if you already have a research paper. Come back to us, we will talk about the specific communication of how we put these research papers in and how we communicate the results, etc., of that particular research paper, and how that elevates your profile furthermore.
How to research for universities? My priority is less tuition fee. Like India, does university name matter a lot for getting a job, or is a lot of it networking? So again, I'm sorry, I'll have to give you a little bit of an it depends answer for this. But less tuition fees is something you find on the website, so that's something you'll have to figure out. There's no other way except getting a shortlisting service like us, or doing your research yourself and figuring out how to get less tuition fee. In the US, then the reputation of the university does matter quite a bit. Again, not because of something like a campus placements. It's simply because in the US, universities have job portals which are unique to the university, like a monster.com, like a naukri.com. Every university has its own university job portal. Obviously, the better universities get a lot more companies posting jobs there, which gives you a lot more opportunities, right? But at the end of the day, we've known people who've gone to inferior universities doing good networking, getting a job a lot faster than people who did not go to a top tier. I've known Columbia grads who got lazy and arrogant, who did not get a job and came back to India. I've known people who've gone to NJIT who've done very well, right? Purely because they did their networking right. Location also is very important, and I cannot go into the specifics of that. If you're applying to computer science, you want to be in certain locations. If you're applying for engineering management or industrial engineering, you want to be in certain places. Why is location important? Because a lot more people to meet, a lot more people working in the area that you can actually have a face-to-face interaction with, a lot more career fairs which are external to the university. If you're in New York, you'll probably be interviewing in 3-4 places a week. If you're at my university, which is Dartmouth, which is an outstanding university, but no locational advantage, you have to keep traveling, right? I'm sure you'll say, I will travel, for an interview, but when you have 4 interviews a week, trust me, you cannot get on a bus every time. So location is very important. But again, networking, through online mediums, getting into good university is important as well. But don't assume that if you don't go to a top 10, you will not get a job, or it becomes impossible for you to get a job. Any top 50 for a lot of programs is fine. But if you go to a completely crap place, then you're not going to get a job, right? So it's very subjective. Depends on university to university. There's no other way other than doing your research or getting somebody who can shortlist the universities for you.
Does having a few years of work experience in an MNC strengthen your profile for admissions for a Canadian university for MEM or engineering management? Sreekar, you want to take that?
It definitely does. Work experience is very important. I almost tell a lot of students who don't have time constraints to get work experience before going abroad, because first of all, it elevates your profile. Because like I said earlier, when you're in a company, they're not going to let you sit idle. You're going to be doing work. There's projects you can put in your SOP, right, and your resume. And also after you graduate, if you have 2-3 years work experience, you're more likely to get hired a lot more easily, right? So work experience definitely is an advantage. But if you do not communicate the advantage of that work experience, and you do not tie your vision into your work experience, there is no point. You have to show that what you've been doing for 2 years or 3 years at your company actually has a lot to do with what you want to do in the future. And that's how, again, like I said, you can leverage that work experience to boost your profile in the eyes of the admissions committee. It's essentially how well you communicate it.
Okay, the next question is, how much do backlogs matter or affect my profile or an application? How do I compensate for that? Very tricky question, right? Again, one of the things that you have to understand is universities, when they're looking for their master's sort of applicant, what they're looking for is, has this particular student already done similar sort of classes? Has he taken something academically that is similar to what he's going to be studying in the master's program? And if yes, what are the grades that he got in those particular sort of courses, right? If your backlogs are in environmental sciences or something that is immaterial to the kind of master's program that you're going to be applying to, not so much of an effect. However, if you're a computer science undergrad who's applying to a computer science master's and you have a backlog or an area in data structures and algorithms or an object-oriented programming, that's a significant red flag. That is something that the universities will essentially, or the committee will essentially perceive as a very big weakness in core engineering of the program that you're going to be applying, and therefore that is going to be grounds for rejection. Depending on which university you're applying to, most universities usually have an additional essay that will ask you essentially, are there things that you've missed out on telling us? Do you have a lower GPA? Do you want to talk about it? Are there any specific reasons for why you did not do as well academically? Do you want to talk about it? That is a great place for you to be communicating if there are significant and reasonable grounds for why you had backlogs. If you had a medical issue or a health issue, or something went wrong in that particular semester, you made up for it, you had to go somewhere to participate in something else. So that's a place that you can use to sort of make up for that GPA if there are actually strong grounds for it. Other things that you can do, of course, is showcase the larger vision. Make sure that your entire essay is grounded in a vision, projects that are leading up to that vision, and then compensate for that lower GPA, maybe with work experience a little bit, maybe with, let's say, very strong projects that are oriented towards a particular sort of vision. So those are things that you can do.
I think there's a quick question, Suraj, that we'll have to defer for a later call. I'll just read it out. I don't know if you have access to this. It says, I have a PhD in English literature, close to 7 years of teaching experience. I think this question is from Devika. Devika, this is a very elaborate answer that will take a little bit of time. I wish we could do it on this webinar, but I think it would be a little unfair for the others listening. If you can just schedule a call with us, we'll try and map it to Suraj, because MPP programs, econ statistics, that kind of stuff is completely Suraj's forte. So I think having a specific conversation with him would help. And also, there's a question, can I lie about community service? I'm not going to answer that. We don't lie on applications. That's unethical. Maybe you can, but we're not going to talk about it.
Actually, I'm going to spend a minute on this. Community, you're applying to a professional master's degree. Community service is the least of your worries. They are not really looking at people who are going out to NGOs and doing a lot of social service. They're looking at technicals, they're looking at academic performance, and they're looking at how, if that is the sort of impact that you want to create, you want to build technology that helps everyone, sure, that's a great sort of a vision to showcase. But specifically catering full paragraph for community service or extracurriculars without any intrinsic sort of goal-oriented stuff is not really something you want to do.
Yeah, I wouldn't spend too much time about that. But again, how you convey things is very important. Like we had one person who took on, a teaching assignment in Vietnam. One of our students who applied last year got into great places. I'm not going to list them out, the typical, your Dukes and Cornells of the world. That's where our good students go. But spoke about that, Vietnam thing, and we decided to keep it in the SOP because he talked about how the class he's going into is so very diverse, and it's going to have people with from so many different backgrounds and countries coming in, and his international experience interacting with these kids and fellow teachers from so many other countries will make him blend into the class like this, right? That is something that really, really helped. And that person told me that that question was asked in the interview as well, which is a huge deal. If somebody's picking up stuff from your SOP and he's addressing that sort of a question. So sure, it's all about the way you can convey it. If you can convey it as well as this guy's done, sure, do it. But if you're applying for a master's in robotics program, don't spend 4 lines talking about how you taught people at an orphanage or something. Sorry if I sound insensitive, but purely from an applications point of view, does not add any value to the admissions officer's mind, at least. I think
I
I
don't have
little pressed for time for the conclusion, but yeah, there's one more question, so go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that. I don't have any thesis-based project or any research paper, but I have decent projects. Will that be a negative point? Although I'm only applying for a non-thesis-based program, it's never going to be a negative
Okay,
point,
fine.
man. I mean, you have decent project. That itself is a very big positive. One of the things you want to make sure is you're applying to the right sort of university curriculum, university course combination. Don't apply to heavily thesis-based programs if you don't come from a very research-based background. Apply for the non-thesis, you'll be absolutely fine. Even for the thesis-based programs as your masters, as long as you're able to convey that the project itself was rooted a little bit in collecting data, maybe doing a little bit of market research here and there, and then that was and is solving a particular impactful problem. As long as you were able to convey it properly, you shouldn't have any problem with that.
All right. I think I'll just quickly address, two questions which I think, some of it might be common to all of you because before I conclude. The first is how much do AWA scores of the GRE affect our application? I've not had anybody, again, always, like I said, logic past example. Sorry, I'm harping about this. The only rejection I've had that I've seen in my experience of guiding, through Gradvine, 3,500 odd students get rejected for an AWA score was 2 years ago. One student from, who applied to Dartmouth MEM got rejected because his AWA score was low, but the rest of his profile wasn't great either. A decent AWA score, and it really doesn't matter. By decent, I mean at least get a 3.5. You will have to do horrendously to get something below a 3. So, as long as you cross that, it's fine. Would I be at a disadvantage of having 3 years of work experience but a break in work before applying? Not really. Fortunately for foreign universities, break time or break years, in fact, are very, very common. They're not looked at as a negative like Indian companies and Indian universities do. So, it's absolutely fine to have a little bit of a break. Just don't address it too much unless you're doing worthwhile work in your application. Does 2 years work experience compensate for low GPA? If your projects are good at work and if they're related to the long-term vision that you're portraying, then yes. If you're applying to a mechanical engineering master's and you did 2 years of work in IT, then no. It has to be related to your goal.
Okay.
ECE to CSE.
Yeah, those are
Should we
very
stop?
specific questions that we'd
Yeah,
encourage you to set up, schedule your free consultation calls. It'll either be
we'll
single or
absolutely.
also you can have a lot more discussion in terms of personalized sort of profiles. I do want to take the last couple of minutes to quickly talk about people that are in their second and third years before we go on to scheduling just in general about Gradvine. People who are in second and third years, there are two big things that you guys need to do. Second, third, and maybe even people who are in their fourth years. Two big things that you need to do. One, talk to as many people as possible to figure out what are the best possible careers for you and what are the best possible master's degrees to get to those careers. This is what we call conversations. If you do not talk, if you are not aware of all of the careers that are out there and what your specific interests are, you will never be able to craft a really good application to get into a really good university. So point number one is have conversations with as many people as possible, as diverse as possible. The Gradvine network is a great place to be in terms of that, and we highly encourage that you either take the free consultation call and subsequently sign up for the profile building services that we offer. The second thing is make sure to do one critical project, which is in-depth, very well researched, a good project that is in line with the common goal or the vision that you've set for yourself, because universities will lap that up. If you are someone who's, let's say, applying to a computer science or a machine learning sort of a department, and you've done previous projects in machine learning already, or data analytics or a data visualization, which clearly shows that you put in a substantial amount of time and effort, that goes a long way in distinguishing your application from everyone else. So people in second, third, fourth, or pre-final years, etc., these are two critical things that you need to do from a profile building perspective.
All right. So I just wanted to conclude by, why we are doing this, right? In terms of webinars, this is not something we really took out the time to do, a lot. We've been processing, we process close to 350, 400 applications every year, which is a huge number, in this particular segment. But this year, as a company, And this is why I want to connect with you guys as students, as a past applicant myself. We want to put out as much accurate information as possible, because the one thing that really pains us is students coming back having listened to these other so-called consultants with absolutely nonsensical information. um, you will have found, if you've spoken to a lot of consultants, that what information you get from us free is far more valuable than what you're going to get after paying somebody else, right? But let me not go to the commercial stuff about it. Just as a senior advising you, please turn to the right resources for advice. When somebody is giving you advice, please ask what their credentials are, whether they've done the similar program or not, right? um, we put out accurate information just so that you don't fall prey to wrong information. These webinars will continue as long as it's feasible. We will be addressing a variety of different topics. In future, I'm going to be perhaps doing a webinar on SOP drafting. I might do a webinar on GRE tips and tricks, getting somebody who's really cracked a great GRE score. But of course, if you take our paid services for the SOP, the shortlisting and all of that, you get the ultimate advantage, no doubt about it. But again, we are not using this webinar as a marketing thing. So I'm not going to tell you, you absolutely have to take our service to, get into a university. That's not, the way this company functions. We are really out here to help. Definitely taking our services gives you the ultimate advantage, but also use the free resources that we are putting out, right? Keep in touch, register for these webinars constantly. This is a great source of information. The Gradvine network, like Suraj said, I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but it's a network of actual master's graduates from the very best universities all over the world. You post a query there, they're going to answer, right? So don't ask an uncle or an aunt or some other person for information. Leverage the free resource, that's the Gradvine network. You can leverage our YouTube channel, webinars like this, which you may have missed out in the past, which talk about the COVID crisis and how you should plan your masters, which talk about the application timelines when you should be applying, are all on our YouTube channel. You can use that as well. Our LinkedIn page always has articles that are being shared. You can follow Suraj on my LinkedIn's as well, where we put up very informative articles. So just be selective about your sources of information, and keep in mind the logic that I've told you in terms of the admissions committee, and how you have to portray a profile. And of course, anytime you want to speak to us, schedule a free call. If you do want help with the university shortlisting, SOPs, LORs, direct one-on-one help from our mentors, that's something you get through our paid services. So leverage everything Gradvine has to offer. We are only here to help you guys. And yeah, thank you so much again for turning up. It is another solid webinar. I think we're getting great turnouts for this, and few repeats as well, which shows that you're liking the stuff as well. Stay tuned for more. I should be hosting another in a week or 10 days or so. We'll let you know of the same. And apart from this, if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to schedule your free calls with us, or if you have our contacts, drop a text or anything of that sort. Thank you so much, guys. I think that about wraps it up. And it was great speaking to you, and we look forward to seeing all of you again soon.